Welcome to our study on the book of Ephesians. This is session 80. Now, in weeks past, I've exhorted you to start reading this passage that we've been studying for some time now, Ephesians chapter 6, verses 10 through 18. I ask if you would read that at least once a day, maybe read it twice a day. For you people who are just absolutely fanatics, maybe you read it half a dozen times a day, and that is wonderful, and I say fanatic in a good way. And so by now, you should be fairly familiar with the passage, having read it so many times. So what I want to say right here in the beginning is this. As I'm teaching through the notes that I have, I realize that from time to time, I don't say every single thing that is in the notes. That's why I'm encouraging you that after the session, sometime during the week, that you read through the notes, because you'll catch little things that I'm just not talking about. And for instance, I can tell you right off the bat today, there's things in the beginning of these notes I'm not even going to talk about. On the second part of that is, when I'm teaching through this, things occur to me that are not in the notes, and then I wind up talking about them because I think it really explains what we're going over. So what does that mean? Then I would say the best way to study with us is to listen to the video and read the notes. That way, the things I mention that are not in the notes, you get. The things that are in the notes that I don't cover, you get. And you get the full spectrum of everything in the lesson. So really, the video and the notes are made to go together. And they are, in places, redundant, but I really don't think that hurts us too much. Okay, so we have seen how the first three pieces of armor protect us from the phase one attack of the policy of evil. What is the phase one attack? Thank you. Attack the message. And when those attacks fail, when we refuse to corrupt the message, then what happens is Satan unleashes phase two attack, which is, thank you, attack the messenger. And this phase is designed to intimidate those who would make known the doctrines of the mystery. I'm going to get. Can someone just give me an example of that? One of the doctrines of the mystery. I'm talking about the
Rightly
time and
dividing the word.
what'd they say?
Rightly
Thank you,
dividing the word.
thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to do the acronym, right? Rightly dividing the word. Give me another one. Something that pertains to this dispensation of grace. Oh, okay, the mystery of Christ. What else? Thank you. Somebody said something on Zoom, but your mic is so low. I only.
Dispensational change.
Thank you, thank you. The dispensational change. Linda said the manifold wisdom of God. Okay, let's just stop right there because we'll take up too much time. You've got it. Those are the things that make a difference. Talking to Richard earlier, and he was talking about being in the company of another preacher. Where were you, in Missouri? Yeah, okay. And he was talking about the mystery, and he was talking about being under grace and not under the law. And he said that was an interesting conversation. Let's just leave it at there. But I'm glad he was making that known, because these are the things that Satan wants to silence us over. And so the attack is meant to get you to stop talking about those things. Now, what am I doing right here at the beginning? I'm emphasizing the dispensational nature of the phase two attacks. Okay? So you just know that when you're doing these things, you get the attention of the adversary. And so we're going to talk about the nature of those attacks today so that we'll be able to recognize them and know how to handle them when they come. Yes, there is a general policy of evil that is at work in the world, but there is a more individualized policy of evil attack for those who are making known the dispensational truths of living in this time in the world. Now, in this attack against the messenger, Satan has some wiles that he is using, and here's what they're designed to do. They're designed to rob us of the courage to speak about those things. And in the book of 2 Corinthians, there are 8 categories of these attacks, and these attacks are called the sufferings of Christ. So when we use that acronym, you know, okay. So there's 8 categories of those attacks. This is really important. We're going to talk about this more, but we're currently studying 2 Corinthians on Tuesday nights up in Glenrose. And of course, we Zoom that. I know that many of you are watching those series. And if you haven't up till now, and you really want to get the details of these 8 categories of attacks, then join us on Tuesday nights, or at least watch the recordings. And so we do that at 7 o'clock on the second and fourth Tuesday night of each month. And we're not that far into it. We've only done 3 Tuesdays. We do 2 sessions each night. So this a week from this coming Tuesday, I'll be back and we'll be doing sessions 7 and 8. And all we have done up to now is the introduction. So if you want to see that first category and what that's like, you'll get to see that the next time I'm in Glenrose. All right, coming back to the book of Ephesians. God gives us a single piece of armor to protect us from these phase 2 attacks, and it is the shield of faith. Let's read about it here in Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 16. Above all, taking the shield of faith, wherewith ye shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked. Now, what are the fiery darts of the wicked? Well, the fact that they're likened unto fiery darts. Fiery darts is the metaphor. And of course, because of that, we know it's some kind of attack against us, and indeed it is. In the physical realm, whenever a city was under siege, they would fire these flaming arrows or fiery darts into the city. They were different from a normal arrow, and that doesn't matter. I don't even know why I talked about that. That won't do you a bit of good. But they were heavier and they had pitch on them. Okay, so anyway, they would fire these into the city, and the reason they would do that is because, I mean, first of all, if you can hit someone, okay, but the other thing is they were setting things on fire back there. If you could burn up food supplies, if you could burn up shelters, if you could burn up munitions, all of those kinds of things, they would lay siege to a city. And when you saw things on fire, what is the immediate thought of most people? Run. Okay, Gloria says run. You're thinking away, right? Okay. But what else are you what else is going on in your mind? You're behind the city walls, and now your grain stores are on fire. You know, yeah, we got to put that out. If you've got people that are putting out fires, what are they not doing? They're not on the wall fighting the enemy for sure, right? So this was something that was akin to psychological warfare. So you can imagine when you see the city on fire and an enemy army and flaming arrows coming over the wall, this is something that would strike people with fear. It would cause them to be discouraged, maybe even to want to quit, just surrender. I mean, that's what all of that was about. And so, um, there's a lot of parallels. I tell you that story because there's a lot of parallels to the spiritual things that are going on when the fiery darts are directed against us. Those fiery darts come against us in 3 different ways, and now I want you to look at your note taker and we'll begin to fill this in. I'll put it on the PowerPoint. Fiery dart number 1 is the personal attacks. Those are the attacks that come against us personally. Did you guys, does everybody have a note taker? Okay. So it's the personal attacks that come against us. All right. Now I want you to drop down to that second box because we're just going to list these 3 attacks right off the bat. Number 2 is ministry attacks. These are coming out of Paul's epistles, by the way. Okay. But and again, we'll be able to kind of look at these verses. Drop down to that third box, and fiery dart number 3 are the church attacks. So we're going to talk about all 3 kinds of these attacks. We'll describe them, and then, of course, what we want to do is look at the doctrinal remedy for each one of those. Don't confuse the fiery darts with the attacks against the doctrine. The attacks against the doctrine is phase 1, attack the message. This is phase 2. I think when I was in Glen Rose last time, I put this little chart up on the board that looks something like this, and I really like thinking about it this way, that phase 1, attack the message, that's the doctrine, right? Okay. But phase 2 and phase 3, attack the messenger, that's not part of the doctrinal attack. I'm not saying that pressure won't still be there, but this is a totally, I want you to kind of divide off the phases of attack and think, this is the one that's going to get me to misunderstand the doctrine. This is the one that's going to get me to corrupt the message. Okay? This is the one to silence the messenger. Does everybody understand that? Any question about that? Okay. So with that in mind, these attacks against the messenger are going to come in 3 ways. Against the believer individually. If that believer is involved in ministry, it will also come against that ministry and as a part of the church and against the church that they are a part of. Okay, so now back to your note taker. Let's go back up to fiery dart number 1 and let's fill in the effects and the goals. Okay, so what are the effects that Satan is trying to produce, and what is the goal that he's after? So here it is. The effect is to produce a spirit of fear and discouragement to such a degree that he accomplishes his goal, and that is to silence the mystery of Christ. Now, when I say it that way, look, you understand, I'm talking about to silence the doctrines that have to do with the mystery of Christ. That could be the dispensational change. It could be the principles of right division. It could be the gospel. It could be the manifold wisdom of God. It could be the mystery of Christ. It could be any of those doctrines. But the effect is to intimidate a person so that you're fearful of doing it. And if you haven't been fearful of doing it, now is to produce a discouragement to make you rethink all of that. Okay, now let's go to fiery dart number 2. Now, we're not through talking about that, but again, I want to fill in your note taker and then we'll flesh it out. Fiery dart number 2, the ministry attacks. The effect is to discourage and distract. The goal is to keep us from ministering the truth to others. And what truths are we talking about? We're talking about the dispensational truths. We're talking about there was a dispensational change. God is now dealing with Gentiles in a very different way. We're talking about the mystery of Christ that was hidden from the family. All of those things are what constitute the truth. Now, when I say that discourage and distract, let me talk about the distract thing for just a moment. Because I've seen preachers, they have a ministry, right? They're pastoring a church and they're preaching. What happens is when they get attacked or their ministry gets attacked, then they stand up in their pulpit and for the next 6 weeks, they're defending against those attacks. If I'm constantly, and by the way, are we ever criticized in some way? Are things ever said? Well, Barbara goes, no. Okay, so look, but we don't spend our time trying to defend that. Instead, because I know that's a distraction. From what? Okay, okay, what'd you say, Gloria? Yeah, okay. Yeah, the adversary is trying to distract us from what should be taking place here. Not a defense of what we're doing, but the edification of the saints. That's what we're at. That's what these classes are designed to do, to edify the saints, to teach you the Word of God and to see how to practically apply it. And if I'm spending my time defending our ministry, that's the one thing I'm not doing. You know what he just got me to do? Come off the wall and put out fires. So don't get distracted. All right, number 3, fiery dart number 3. The effect is to produce shame and cowardice. The goal is to get us to disassociate ourselves, at least in appearance, or even separate ourselves from the local church. This is the attack number 3, the church attacks. Now, again, we're going to talk about each one of these, but it means disassociate yourself from the other members of the church. Okay, because if you're seen with them, you might be portrayed a certain way. Or to make us, by the way, when the first effect is shame, to make us so ashamed that we are a part of a church that is teaching these doctrines, that if someone asks us, we might go, oh, well, no, I mean, I go there, but I don't really agree with all of that. Do you see what that fiery dart is about? Or, you know what, when you hear that, you may go, I don't know if I want to continue to go there. That means the fiery dart has been successful. That's what that is designed to do. Okay, so by attacking us personally, that means things get said about you personally. Satan is trying to make us think twice about the stand that we're taking. And by the way, I don't want to time out, but I want to just say it this way. The attacks against the messenger are because we would not corrupt the message. You understand? That's the context in which we're talking about here. So, in other words, if you were to change the message and go, hey, I don't think that anymore. Now, here's what I think. We don't rightly divide the word. Those things over there in the Old Testament, those are the things that are for us. We don't, there's no, the mystery of Christ is not really what I thought it was. If you come off of all of that, then you know what would happen? All of these attacks would stop. And so and of course, that is the reason for the attacks. So the goal of attacking us personally is to produce that spirit of fear in us, which would cause us to keep silent about these doctrines which concern the dispensation of grace. Let me give you an example. I was talking earlier about Richard's experience this week and talking to somebody about that. You know, what wouldn't surprise me is that one day Richard does that and somebody really pushes back and go, oh, I've heard of that. Let me tell you what's wrong with that, and then begin, to kind of make it. And you know what that is? That's an intimidation tactic to make Richard think, oh, well, I don't want to bring that up anymore. They obviously don't know Richard. But anyway, I'm just going to say good luck with that one. But I'm going to say that's what that's geared to do, to intimidate you. Look, I can remember times when I was in college when someone would, a professor would be talking about something, and he, would ask someone a question, trying to get, is there anybody that actually believes blah blah blah? And if you go, I do, he's gonna spend the next 5 minutes berating you in front, of the whole class. And you know what that was? That's an intimidation tactic. And you know what it's made to do? Yeah, to shame you into silence, and I'm not going to raise my hand on that anymore. I've told you stories like that before, but you get the idea. These are the things that cause us to keep silent about the doctrines which concern the dispensation of grace that we're presently living in. And when we hear someone else attacking those doctrines, it makes us reluctant to defend them. And that is exactly what the fiery darts are designed to do. Back to Ephesians 6, look with me in verse 13. What are we supposed to do? Wherefore, take unto you the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all to stand. To withstand in the evil day is to stand up against the fiery darts in the evil day. What is the evil day? When the attack now turns from against the message to against you as the messenger. That's the evil day. I've heard preachers talk about the evil day, that it's, some of them think it's the day when the Antichrist shows up, or some of them think about, but you understand, this is written in Ephesians 6 to not only the folks back in Ephesians then, but to us today. And if you're not living during that time, what in the world was that admonition for? So this is when the attack becomes the attack against the messenger. And okay, so now let's take a look at it. Go back now to verse 16, Ephesians 6:16. Above all, taking the shield of faith, wherewith you shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked. Now, for almost all of my Christian life that I have been aware of this verse, I have been taught and have come to understand that this was reading this way. Taking the shield of faith, wherewith you shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the devil. That's the way that was understood with me. So I got to looking in my commentaries, and that's what they all said, that these are the fiery darts of the devil. I'm going to suggest to you that's not what that verse is saying. Because one day I read that. Look, when you've been studying and preaching the Bible for years, there are certain phrases that you come across and you just understand them a certain way. And so when I read this verse and I read the fiery darts of the wicked, it suddenly occurred to me, wait a minute. That's not talking about the devil. I know that sounds heretical. You folks on Zoom, don't change to cartoons yet, okay? Let me make a case here for you. So what we're going to do is step aside and do a very brief, I know you're not supposed to do this, Bible study. Now here's what we're going to do. I'm going to take the fiery darts of the wicked. Let's just use that phrase, the wicked, okay? Because to me, when I see the term the wicked, let me just put it up here. I read this and I suddenly realized that's plural. That's more than one person. The wicked is more than one. So if it was just the devil, it would just be one. So I started looking up the word wicked in my Bible. And here's what I found out. That from what is commonly referred to as the New Testament, which is Matthew to Revelation, okay? From Matthew to Revelation, the word wicked shows up 24 times. Everybody with me? Okay. 13 of those times, it is an adjective that is not talking about anybody in particular. For instance, it'll talk about that wicked generation, okay, that wicked servant. But it's not naming anybody. It's just an adjective that's describing something, okay? So 13 times, and then I promise you, you can go look them up. In those 13 times, they are not talking about the devil. The word is not being used as a noun. It's being used as an adjective. Now, I'm sorry for the grammar spasm here that makes everybody's eyes roll back in their head. But you know what a noun is. It's a person, place, or thing. And an adjective describes a noun, right? So this 13 times, this is an adjective, okay? And the word, and so it's not talking about the devil. It is just describing other nouns. Now, 6 times. So what does that leave us? So that's going to leave us 11 times. right? That the word wicked. And from that 11 times, 6 times, it is also used as an adjective, but it is followed by the word one, which means now you're not talking about a plural, now you're talking about a singular. And every time it does that, that is when it is talking about Satan. Everybody with me? So I want to show you these verses. We'll do them really quick. Well, I feel like we need to get up and do a jumping jack or something so that you'll get your blood flowing. So I don't want to put you to sleep, but here it is. Matthew 13:19. When anyone heareth the word of the kingdom and understandeth it not, then cometh the wicked one and catcheth away that which was sown in his heart. That is a reference to the devil. But do you notice that particular phrase, the wicked one? Everybody see that? Here's number 2. When Jesus is giving them parables and the disciples come and say, can you explain to us this parable? And he begins to do that. Look in verse 13, and this is what he's doing here, Matthew 13:38. The field is the world, the good seed are the children of the kingdom, but the tares are the children of the wicked one. That's a reference to Satan. Okay? Here's the next one. 1 John 2:13. I write unto you, fathers, because you have known him that is from the beginning. I write unto you, young men, because you have overcome the wicked one. That's a singular, right? That's someone specific, and he's talking about the adversary. Here's the next one, 1 John 2:14. I have written unto you, fathers, because you have known him that is from the beginning. I've written to you, young men, because you're strong, the word of God abideth in you, and you have overcome the wicked one. Again, a reference to the devil. Yes, wicked is an adjective describing the one, but when it does it that way, you're talking about Satan. Here's the next one. 1 John 3:12. Not as Cain, who was of that wicked one, talking about the devil. Here's the next one. Let me keep up in my notes. 1 John 5:18. We know that whosoever is born of God sinneth not, but he that is begotten of God keepeth himself, and that wicked one toucheth him not. There's all 6 verses. I just gave them to you. Those 6 are talking about the adversary, talking about Satan, and the wicked is always qualified with the word one. So if we had 11 instances left to look at, and 6 of them are about the devil, that leaves us with 5. And these 5 are not used as adjectives. They're used as nouns. The word wicked is used as nouns. And I want to show you these verses. So the first one is, we have a single entry in 2 Thessalonians where wicked is used as a noun, and it is talking about the Antichrist. Take a look at 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 8. And then shall that capital W, wicked, be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth and destroy with the brightness of his coming. That is the Antichrist. So that leaves us with how many? So you got 1, it's used as a noun, leaves us with 4. So that's the Antichrist. And now we only have 4 of those wicked nouns left, okay? So let's take a look at 3 of them. So then, this is Matthew 13:49. So shall it be at the end of the world. The angel shall come forth and sever the wicked. Notice how that is? It's just this phrase right here. The wicked. And shall sever the wicked from amongst the just, and shall cast, what's that next word? Them. Plural or singular? The wicked are plural. If it's just the wicked, if you add the word one, now what do you know? You're talking about Satan. But when you're just talking about the wicked, it's always qualified as a plural group. So he'll sever the wicked from among the just. By the way, is there more than one wicked person? That will be severed from among the just. Is the just one person? Okay, you get it. There you go. All right, so here, take a look at this next one. This is 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 7. And delivered just Lot, vexed with the filthy conversation of the wicked. By the way, where was Lot living? In Sodom, right? Okay. Vexed with the conversation of the wicked. That's the only way. I'm going to tell you that when the Bible uses just the word wicked, it's plural. Will the verse bear that out? For the righteous man dwelling among them, in seeing and hearing, vex his righteous soul from day to day with their unlawful deeds. Who? The Sodomites. So it's a plural, is it not? Let me give you the next one. This is going to be 2 Peter chapter 3 and verse 15. An account that the long suffering of our Lord is salvation, even as our beloved brother Paul, also according to the wisdom given unto him, hath written unto you, as also in all his epistles, speaking in them of these things, in which are some things hard to be understood, which they, I want you to notice the plural, they that are unlearned and unstable wrest the scriptures, as they do also other scriptures unto their own destruction. Ye therefore, beloved, seeing you know these things before, beware lest ye also, being led away with the error of who? The wicked. And guess what? It's a plural. Anytime you see the wicked like that, it's used as a plural, as a noun phrase. And by the way, I went back in the Old Testament, the word wicked gets used hundreds of times. So let's go through them all really quick. I'm kidding. Oh my goodness. All right. Linda's halfway to the car when I said that. I mean, oh my goodness. All right. I want to give you two, just to show you right off the bat. And Abraham drew near and said, wilt thou also destroy the righteous with the wicked? It's a plural. Exodus 23:7. Keep thee far off from a false matter, and the innocent and righteous slay thou not, for I will not justify the wicked. It's a plural. We see this all through the Bible. So if you've got that in your head, now come back to the only one that's left. Remember, we ran 3 references, okay? And we talked about the wicked being a plural. So we've only got one left. You go, aha, what verse did you not read us? Actually, it was the first one we read. Here it is. Above all, taking the shield of faith, wherewith you shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of a group of people that God is calling the wicked. Why is he doing it that way? Why didn't he say the fiery darts of the devil? By the way, he does use the word devil in here, right? Yeah, because he's showing you where the fiery darts are coming from. See, what happens is when someone says something to you about that, unless you realize this is who he's using, you won't associate that with being the fiery darts. You'll just think, well, that person was rude, or why did they say that to me? Or, boy, that sure stirred them up. No, you need to understand you're in phase 2, the attack against the messenger, and it can come against you individually, it can come against your ministry, it can come against your church. And these fiery darts, they're coming from a group of people that Paul is now calling the wicked. Okay, so, and by the way, I'm convinced I'm right. In your notes, I do go, I'm not quite sure the old understanding was right, but I really am. I just said that to be nice until I could kind of show you the evidence of it. Now, why are we covering this? Because when people attack us in certain ways, we often don't see those attacks for what they are. They are the fiery darts that Paul is talking about here. And if we're going to keep them from because when people do that, you go, well, that hurt my feelings. Yeah, well, that's the intended effect, so that you'll be silent about those doctrines, trying to make it uncomfortable enough on you that you won't continue to talk about them. So don't be surprised when those attacks happen. Look, if I'm with a group of people and they say to me, don't you think all these things that are happening in the world today, and I know you're aware of recent events, probably most of you, but all these, I mean, surely that's a sign that the end is near. And I'm going to go, no, it's not. I was having a discussion with Arturo about this week, and here's the thing. He's saying that, so he's likely going to get phase 2 of the attack because he understands something that's going on. Look, and I understand, hard things happen, but those are not the signs that people think they are. So when people attack us for adhering to the doctrines that our apostle has talked to us about and taught us, they are carrying out the phase 2 attack of the policy of evil. They may not realize it, but they are opposing themselves by attacking us. And according to Ephesians 6:12, even though the wicked are attacking us, our fight is not with flesh and blood, but it's with principalities and powers. So you have to remember, even though these are the people that are doing it, what do we really want out of those people? What do we really want with regard to those people? And you say, well, they're my enemy. I just want to crush them. No. They're the pawns of the adversary. What do we want from those people? We want them to know the truth. That's what we want. Okay? All right. So as we respond properly to these doctrines, they work to strengthen our inner man so that no matter what else may be happening, you know what? That shield of faith protects us when we're personally attacked so that we don't faint. And I'm using the Bible word here. What does it mean to faint in the Bible? And it says, faint not. What's it talking about? Yeah, don't quit. Yeah, there you go. Okay. So recently, I'm going to introduce this next part. Someone asked me, look, if it's not the sufferings of Christ, in other words, if you're not suffering because you wouldn't corrupt the message, and people are opposing these doctrines, and so they're opposing you, but it's just the sufferings of this present time. It's because we just live in a fallen world. It's not really about the doctrine. Can you still get the shield of faith to help you in those times when you're going through those sufferings? And is there a reward for that like there is for the sufferings of Christ? And I believe the answer to both questions is yes. Yes. Now, we may get a chance to talk about that a little bit, but I want to use that. But let me give you an example. Let's suppose that you are going through some physical, you know what, you were on the roof putting up your Christmas lights and you slipped and you fell off and you broke your arm. Okay? Like Sarita does sometimes. She wasn't on the roof, but we all know the story. All right. So when our suffering, so she suffered a physical injury, okay? When we suffer physical injuries, even from just the sufferings of this present time, we don't get overwhelmed by our circumstances if we rely on the doctrine. And I know that's probably not a really good example. Most people don't get overwhelmed by breaking their arm, but people do go through some very serious infirmities and sicknesses and illnesses and things like that. Those things were not caused, because of the policy of evil. They were just part of the sufferings that take place in this world. And let me give you a verse for that. Are you ready? Here it is. This is going to be, I'm sorry, not that one. 2 Corinthians 4:16. For which cause, Paul says, we faint not, or we don't quit, but though our outward man perish, yet the inward man is renewed day by day. So, you know what? Let's suppose I go to the doctor and I get he says to me, hey, look, we did some tests here. We need to run some other tests. It looks like something may be going on. He does that. And let's suppose that he finds I have some kind of dread disease. My outward man is perishing. Maybe he looks at me and he says, look, maybe you have this much time left, but you're just not going to survive this. Instead of being overwhelmed by that, my inward man, my soul and spirit, the real me, can actually be renewed day by day, even though my outward man is perishing. And that doesn't have to have anything to do with the doctrine. That can just be because I contracted this thing in this life. So getting back to the fiery darts that we have to deal with phase 2 of the policy of evil, when we respond in faith to the doctrine, not only when we're attacked, but when our ministry, if you're involved in some kind of ministry, if your ministry is attacked, you will not faint. Let me show you Paul's reference for this one. So there's a personal one. Here's a ministry one. Paul says, therefore, seeing we have this ministry. Did the Apostle Paul have a ministry of any kind? He did. As we have received mercy, we faint not. We don't quit then either. So you don't quit under the personal attack. You don't quit under the ministry attack. And so when we talk about the attack being against our church, that was the third one. That will be in light of being a part of a church that is standing up for and proclaiming the doctrines of right division or the mystery of Christ or the dispensational change or the manifold wisdom of God or any of a dozen other things that we could have listed and put on the board. Satan hates the churches that teach these doctrines, and the attack is supposed to make us so intimidated by that we'll either disassociate ourselves from that church, or we'll at least not talk about our affiliation with it. You know what it kind of reminds me of? Peter was the recipient of this kind of thing. And remember when Jesus is being crucified and they're at the fire, and this young gal looks at Peter and she goes, "Oh, I think he's one of their disciples." And you remember what he said? "Oh, I don't know him. I don't know him." Fiery dart. Intimidate him into silence. It's exactly what that was designed to do. But the sufferings that come upon us are designed to make us fearful, to be discouraged, and to quit. What is the verse for that? Here we go. 2 Timothy 1:7. For God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Now, here's the thing you need to understand. The majority of the doctrines that produce comfort and patient endurance in the midst of the sufferings of Christ are taught to us in these books. Because if you're sitting here at this point, you're probably saying, okay, look, I understand the doctrine is supposed to help us patiently endure sufferings. We've talked a lot about the sufferings before. But if I were to say to you, where are you going to go in the scriptures to get this comfort, to produce a patient endurance in the midst of it? Now you'll understand why you may be a little foggy on that one. Because the books in Paul's epistles that give us the majority of the doctrines to deal with the sufferings of Christ are this. 2 Corinthians, Philippians, First and 2 Timothy, and Titus. Those are the books. Where have we been so far? Romans. I finished 1 Corinthians. We're just now starting 2 Corinthians. This is why I said to you a while ago, if you really want to understand the doctrine that allows you to patiently endure the sufferings of Christ and not quit, you're going to get that doctrine out of these books right here. Which means the 2 Corinthians study ought to be something that every saint is engaging in so they can get that initial doctrine. By the way, I know we're in Ephesians 6, and if we were doing this in order, just one thing in order instead of doing it in two different places, you know what? By the time I'm reading this in Ephesians 6 to you, you would have already been through 2 Corinthians. You would already have that whole book of doctrine working in you. And then you know what the next book would be? Because in a few weeks, this is where we'll be in the book of Philippians. And then you'd be getting the advanced doctrine to be able to equip you to be able to do that. So if you feel like I'm a little fuzzy on how this thing works, I understand that. But this is going to get introduced to us in 2 Corinthians. It'll get expanded on in Philippians and 1st, 2nd Timothy, and then into Titus. Okay, so that third fiery dart of attacking the church is to make us ashamed of anything in connection with it. It'll make us ashamed of the gospel that we believed, by which we are saved. Let me give you, look, let me just run to Paul's epistles and show you 3 verses where Paul is going to address this issue of trying this fiery dart to make you ashamed. So here it is. Number 1, Paul says in Romans 1:16, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believeth, to the Jew first and also to the Greek." Why would he say that unless there was an attack against that? I mean, of course there is an attack that is supposed to make Paul ashamed of that. Here's the second one. This is 2 Timothy 1:12. "For the which cause I also suffer these things, nevertheless I am not ashamed." Can I just give you the context for this so this will make sense? In 2 Corinthians, one of the things that they had against Paul, they were denying his apostleship and they were denying the truth of what he was teaching them. And do you know what the basis of that was on? A good bit of it? The fact that Paul was suffering so much. They were going, how can you be a representative of God and you're going through all these sufferings? And then you know what Paul is going to turn around and do? He's going to say, hey, and so they were going, so we don't think you're a real apostle and we don't think you're teaching the truth. And Paul's going to turn around and say, actually, the things that I am suffering are the proof that I'm a real apostle and what I'm teaching you is true. So he's going to put, it's just a whole different way to look at it. And suddenly now the Corinthians are faced with something. So Paul is saying, for the which cause I also suffer these things. So Paul was saying, hey, I'm not ashamed of the things that I'm having to suffer, the sufferings of Christ. I'm suffering these things because I wouldn't succumb to this attack. And I'm not ashamed of that. And I'm not trying to hide it. See, that's the way we would normally do. Oh, no, I'm not suffering. No, Paul is. He's even going to list them. And he's going to say, I'm not ashamed of that. By the way, it also had an effect on the people who were listening to him. They would go, man, your apostle, that guy is just suffering so much. In fact, they put him in prison. He's a jailbird. That guy, you got a criminal, you're following a criminal? And so were there people that became ashamed of that? Yeah, you know what that was? Fiery dart number 3. Make us ashamed so that we don't want to associate anymore. That's exactly what this was. They couldn't see it for what it was. See it for what it is and where it's coming from. See, they never associated that with something that Satan was orchestrating, and so they couldn't respond to it right. So Paul says, hey, I'm not ashamed of that. Let me give you this third one. The Lord give mercy unto the house of Onesiphorus, for he oft refreshed me and was not ashamed of my chain. What does that mean? He's not ashamed of my chain. Like Paul had a gold chain around his neck, but it wasn't real fancy. No, that's not it. He's talking about him being in prison. He's chained in a place, and yeah, he said, Onesiphorus, he said, that guy wasn't ashamed of what was happening to me. So let's make sure that we understand what the shield of faith is about. Listen carefully. The shield of faith is the doctrine which is mainly sitting in these books that we utilize to be strengthened when we are under attack so that we do not quit. Do I need to say that again? The shield of faith is the doctrine mostly contained in these books that we rely on so that when we come under the sufferings of Christ, we don't quit. And by quit, I mean we don't silence the message, we don't disassociate ourselves, we don't become ashamed, We're not intimidated into silence. We're not fearful. Those things don't have that effect on us. Where do you get that? From the doctrines that are mainly, not all, mainly sitting in these books right here. That is the shield of faith. Now, when Paul has arranged these books, by the time he writes this in Ephesians 6, he's thinking, you've already gotten that. So if you wanted to be kind of specific about it, you could say it's the doctrine sitting in 2 Corinthians, because Paul, now that he's bringing up the shield of faith, he's thinking you already have that. And if you have that shield of faith out of 2 Corinthians, now that doesn't mean there's not stuff in Philippians, 1, 2 Timothy, and Titus that you need to know. There is. Can anybody tell me why?
The advanced attacks.
Thank you, Larry Daniels, that guy. What'd you say, Mark?
Because they're attacks to pastors.
Okay. Yeah. So here's what you have. When you're in Romans, 1st, 2 Corinthians, and Galatians, you have those initial phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 attacks. But then when your doctrine goes beyond that into Ephesians, Philippians, and Colossians, you get another round of the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 attacks, but they're advanced attacks. So you know what you're going to get in Philippians, Timothy, and Titus? Advanced doctrine to remedy those advanced attacks. So that's what's going on here. So I think specifically, I mean, I'm not trying to say these other things aren't worth anything. Of course they are. But by the time Paul is saying this, above all, taking the shield of faith, wherewith you shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked, he's saying that doctrine that you've learned in 2 Corinthians, and by the way, in 2 Corinthians, 13 chapters, the whole book is about this. That's why I said there's 8 categories of them in there. And then you're going to get that under your belt. That's where the shield of faith comes in. In these other books, you just get a little added dimension to that same shield of faith, if I can say it that way. So the attack, so let's talk about these attacks for a moment, because I want you to have them in your mind. The attacks against Paul, which he addresses in 2 Corinthians, come from 2 sources. It comes from people who are outside the church at Corinth, and it comes from people who have inserted themselves inside the church at Corinth. So all of these attacks come from one of those 2 sources. And I know that sounds like, well, duh, but really there's specificity to that. Okay, so, and we'll see it when we get over there. I want to give us an idea of the kind of attacks that came against the Apostle Paul. I'm going to start with the category 1 attacks. I'll just throw some stuff in there. I'm just going to do it in my own vernacular, because in that study, we'll be able to see these really up close in detail. But so we're going to talk about the personal attacks. I'm going to talk about the ministry attacks, and I'm going to talk about the church attacks. Just talking about the personal attacks, here's what Paul was being faced with. That it was first an attack on Paul's integrity. What does that mean? If someone attacks your integrity.
Your character.
Yeah, okay, all right. Yeah, all of those things that were just said, those are part of that. In other words, your integrity is your trustworthiness, right? If you can't be trusted, you don't have integrity. So Paul's integrity is coming under attack. So here's the first thing he's being charged with, that he is being duplicitous. He's being two-faced and dishonest. In other words, he's saying one thing over here, but saying something else over there. And that he's misleading people. Now, you have to understand, we'll get into that. They spread the lie that Paul was insincere and he could not be trusted. And then they insisted that Paul was really little more than a tyrant. They looked at Paul's leadership style and they determined that he was domineering and that he was bossy and that he was overbearing with people. So that's what they accused him of. They accused him of being heavy-handed, being over-assertive. Basically, they painted Paul as a bully and kind of a dictator who intimidated people and terrorized them into believing his doctrine, forcing his doctrine on them. All of this is just part of that attack against Paul personally. And as you can imagine, those things, look, especially when people in the church start saying those things, look, these are people he led to Christ, he helped them form this church, and now they're saying these kinds of things against him. Do you think that was hurtful? I'm going to tell you why it was hurtful. Because Paul so deeply loved these people. I mean it. I mean it. Look, I want to explain it this way. The love that Paul had for the people at Corinth is the kind of love that most of the world just doesn't see from someone in that kind of a relationship. Sure, we think our family loves us, and maybe our closest friends. But when you're talking about Paul and what he had invested his life in for them and what he was enduring for their sake, he truly loved them with godly love and charity. And I don't think they understood it in its depth. So when they turn around and make these kinds of accusations to Paul, I think those are deeply hurtful because of how much he really does care about them. And not only is that meant to have an effect on Paul, it's meant to have an effect on the other people because they're not saying it kindly. They're attacking him personally to injure him in the minds of others as well, causing them to turn from Paul's doctrine and to deny Paul's apostleship. And you know how this works. All you need is for someone to make the criticism. And boy, does that start working in your head. And then people begin to believe what they have heard. Look, for us, there have been people who have been warned off of this ministry because I want to dominate and be domineering over your whole life. When I heard that, I said, because this was said to someone, and who's now part of the Zoom group, and I said, really? And they said, yeah. But you know what I found out? You were less domineering than they were. Look, but here's the thing: if you know me, you know how I feel about this tutor and governor issue, about trying to tell everybody what to do and all of that kind of business. But let's get off of that and get back to Paul. In the face of all of this, the shield of faith is what allowed Paul to continue. This is marvelous to me, and I didn't say it this way in the notes, but to continue to love these people like he had and to continue his ministry without quitting. Look, you know what most people would have done like that if someone had attacked them that way? They would be going, you know what, I'm not quitting, but I'm done with you. Paul's not doing that. Paul continues to love them just as much as he ever did. And that isn't easy. In fact, you can't do that in your flesh. This is something only the doctrine can really produce. I don't know if you understand the depth of what I'm about to say, but in 2 Corinthians, you are looking at the hardest, most difficult days of Paul's ministry. Heart-wrenching days. He wasn't even sure the church of Corinth was going to survive all of the things that were going on. I'm really glad Paul didn't throw in the towel and quit on them. But he continued to do what he did. So I hope that at this point we understand a little bit now about the shield of faith and what is going on. If you do, you will be anticipating the doctrine that we'll be covering in 2 Corinthians so that you can not only see all these different kinds of attacks, but you'll also begin to understand the doctrinal remedy for it. And I think This is life-changing for us, so I'm really excited for us to go through it. Now, if you're watching this as a recording, did you know that you can join us live on Sundays on Zoom? And if you'd like to do that or request materials, we do notes for all the lessons, or you have questions to ask, or any of those kinds of things, let me show you how you can contact us. You can call us toll-free at 888-605-3202, or you can email us at staff@mbiworldwide.org. Thank you for being a part of the lesson today, and we hope to see you next time.
When you talked about the fiery darts of the wicked, my question is, can the fiery darts of the wicked also come from the old carnal man of a believer?
Oh, sure. Sure. But here's why I was making that point, Cindy. Okay, I'm going to answer your question, yes and no. So let me explain it. No, in the sense that just an old carnal believer, look, they're not going to qualify to be the fiery darts that Paul is talking about unless they are related to the doctrine that you are teaching. So if someone's just their old understanding that, and they're just being critical of you, but it's because of those doctrines, then yeah, I think that would qualify to be fiery darts. But most of the time, somebody's carnal, fleshly nature, just being at work, they're not really criticizing you over these things. They're doing they're criticizing you for other things. It's not because there's a doctrinal difference. So that's the point that I think that's the point of distinction that I want to make about the fiery darts. They are attacks because you believe in the dispensational change, because you believe in the manifold way, because you believe in the mystery of Christ, because you rightly divide the word, because of those things. And there's others that we could put in there. I would include the King James Bible as part of that. But you know what? When you get attacked because of those things, but their attack is not arguing the doctrine. Their attack is, oh, that's Cindy. She just, you know what? She doesn't know what she's talking about. Let me tell you what's wrong with her. And if those are motivated because you're defending those things and proclaiming those things, then yes, those are the fiery darts. If they are just because somebody doesn't like you, maybe you live in a nicer house, or they don't like your kids, or whatever it is, that's not what Paul has in mind here in Ephesians 6. But is there a way to deal with those? There is. But I think what he's talking about here is the attacks that come as a direct result of proclaiming the truth. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. I will consider that, and also how that how when you know the doctrine and when it's worked in your inner man, and so you may not be speaking it out and teaching it, but you may be living that character of God that comes from the doctrine. When you are attacked because that character of God is displayed in you because of the doctrine, and
that's fiery
could
darts.
That also be?
That's
fiery darts.
That's fiery darts.
Oh, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm glad you understood my question.
I did. Thank you.
Great question.
Yes, please. Next time. Bye for now.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Brother Mike.